Welcome to the SubHub podcast. I'm MK Sullivan.
And I'm Danny Moreno. I don't know why I said that so weird.
That's right.
Um, well, welcome. This is actually going to be our last episode of the year. It's kind of weird. It's kind of our inaugural year, but we started in April. But based on the calendar year, this is the end of our first year of the podcast. So yeah, thanks. First off, thanks to everyone who's been tuning in this year. We're going to continue, going after it with this. We're very passionate about this area of the space. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to our channels, both on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Share with your friends, like, comment, and continue sending us DMs. We love those. We love hearing what you guys like about episodes, ideas that you guys have, questions, etc. So yeah, thanks for joining us for 2023. Does that kind of feel weird saying?
It does feel weird, like end of our 2023 season.
Yeah.
Even though we started in April, I can't believe how long we've already been doing this
Oh,
and how
yeah.
many episodes. This is going to be like episode 41 or 42, something like that. That doesn't include our Sears and All interviews, our Golden
Yeah.
Trail World Series interviews. Like we have hammered some stuff out this year.
Yeah, it definitely has flown by. And I think for a lot of my friends who, knew me both in my previous tech career, they're like, what, how did you just get another job right away while you're also still in tech? Because that's when I still had that. But to me, this is just so, I don't know, it's just so easy because it's so fun chatting with you and chatting with all our guests and stuff.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. And you and I have become really good friends through this too. Like
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
talking to Francesco when he interviewed me the other day and he was asking about our friendship. And I was like, I honestly haven't known Danny that long. We knew each other for less than a year and we were like, let's start a podcast.
That was a ballsy move on your end. You're
It
like,
worked
hey,
out.
it did work out. Yeah, thanks for asking me. It's pretty crazy to think about that. A little bit of the backstory is MK reached out and was like, hey, do you want to start a podcast? And I texted her almost immediately back, I'm going on a run, let me think about it. And then during the run, yes, that's a great idea. Let's do this.
I think you may have sent me like five text messages during the run too, because that's like what you do. Danny, that
Yeah.
like she'll go on a run and she'll send me like 6 or 7 voice text messages about ideas that she has. And that was the beginning of that.
And yeah, that was the perfect intro to this relationship.
Hmm.
I just find I think so much during runs. It's like the perfect time to get the creative juices of flowing. Maybe.
Yeah. No, it depends
Yeah.
on the day for me. I'm either thinking about absolutely nothing and just zoning out,
Yeah.
or I'm like, I should be like voice texting this thought that I have into a note so that I don't forget about it later.
The problem is if I feel that my brain is kind of cartoonish, where it's just constantly linear going forward, that if I don't put it down in that moment, it's gone. Maybe
Yeah.
that's part of it too.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyways, so happy end of 2023. So with this being our last episode of the year, just a little, carrot, a little foreshadowing into what to expect after the new year. We're going to be doing some fun episodes with our own coaches, which I think we're both equally very excited about this. Kind of inside to the locker room chat, give you some potential lessons here and there of how people talk with their coaches, what they talk about. And then, obviously being at a professional level, what do those conversations look like? Yeah, anything to add there?
Our hope, we'll see how this goes once we get into it, but our hope is that we can also maybe give you guys some insight into what our conversations look like with our coaches after races too. So
Yeah.
this is hopefully going to be something that we continue on through the year, but we'll just kind of see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see what the response is to that. Another thing is we'll do a couple other ones with other coaches who coach both ultra and sub ultra athletes, and giving some insight into what that training may look like similarly or in a different way. We'll have an announcement with ATRA. I don't know how I even say that. ATRA.
ATRA.
Yeah, ATRA, American Trail Running Association. If you don't know already, this is kind of like our governing body of sorts for trail and mountain running in America. So they help establish the championships that also coincide with USA TF championships. So like the official USA championships. So we'll have an exclusive announcement episode with them, which I'm really excited about. And we also have an episode coming out with our sponsor, Never Second, where we will talk with the founder, Bill Armstrong, about the company, why he started it, why you should take Never Second. And yeah, just a heads up, if you are looking to refuel the stockpile, I don't know about you, MK, but I literally have baskets and tubs full, always ready to go for
Oh
runs
yeah.
and training and races that may come up. But yeah, don't forget to use our code SUBHUB25 to get 25% off your order of Never Second.
Yeah, no, we have a cabinet in our laundry room that has started to overflow. The doors don't close anymore. They're just
Yeah.
like permanently open. But yeah, go use the code SUBHUB25 and get ready for your February, March race that we all know you're running.
Yes, exactly. Don't want to delay it too far. It has to be,
Yeah.
a little after the new year where it's maybe respectable. I don't know. Yeah, and okay, just a couple other things we wanted to catch up on that we are excited about that occurred or is occurring in the space is Golden Trail launched their calendar. First thoughts.
I am so stoked about the new races. I'm excited that it seems like every couple years Golden Trail just gets a little bigger, a little better. And I think including a Japanese race, a Chinese race, and a Polish race, like how cool.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
we just need a couple races in Africa and we're like in South America and we're good to go. This is gonna be an
yeah,
all year round thing soon enough.
yeah. Maybe APAC too. I could see people wanting them over there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll end up being like 12, 12 races.
You
Uh,
never stop racing.
Yeah, never stop racing. Yeah, I was really excited about it too. I like how they adopt the same format to the US that they kind of brought over and have been kind of experimenting with in Europe too. So you know, it depends on your flexibility and your schedule, but in quotes, it is only one trip, right? So back-to-back races instead of being there for a race and potentially having to stay or go home for 2, 3
Yeah.
weeks and then coming back. So that's cool with Asia. And to me, honestly, what stand or has stood out also in recent years is that they really are focusing on like that 20 to 30K range more and more. Whereas before, I think more of them were 4 to 5 hour races, at least in 2021. But now it just is like really in that spot.
Yeah, I think part of it is that those are the races that are more watchable, but also it just makes it more feasible for the athletes to actually compete like from April to October.
Totally.
Because even still you have like Marathon du Mont Blanc and Zagama, which are 4.5 hour races depending on, the day. But the rest of them will all be pretty short.
Yeah.
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 So in April, we have back-to-back weekends, one in Japan at Kobe Trail and one in China at the Four Sisters Mountain Trail. Then Zagama on May 26th, Mont Blanc Marathon on June 30th, the Tatra Sky Marathon on is that August 17th? Yeah, August 17th. Wait, hold on.
It goes Sierra Zanell and then Tatra.
Sierra
Sierra
Zanal,
Zanell is August 10th.
it's not on the website. That's gotta be
It's
in
a
the
mess up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be the 10th is Sears and All, 17th Tatra Sky Marathon. Honestly, I don't know much about Poland, but I'm wondering how easy it'll be to get from Sears and All to Poland since it's back to back. And then you have the Headlands 27K on September 14th, followed by Mammoth Trail Fest on September 22nd. I'm excited about that. Honestly, shout out to Jeff Stern and Tim Tolson. Both have this experience where they like open a race one year and the next year it
Yeah.
gets picked up by Golden Trail.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, congrats to them. I do feel for Pikes Peak,
Yes.
and the history there. And word is that potentially it was because they lack the ability to do live stream. I mean, it's up at 14,000 feet and sometimes there's bad weather. So I could see why it can be tough to video that entire race. And it's basically all single track too, like once
Yeah.
you're up and going. So it's a little tough to get cameras in there following the race, I think, potentially for that reason too.
Well,
Um,
especially because there's only like two places that you can get on the course, at the bottom and at the top.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
13 miles long one way. So like that does make it difficult. They'd have to be out there early, like running the entire course basically.
yeah, yeah. So the logistics there are just a little too hard or difficult. So I mean, how long does Remy's record stand now? We'll see through the
Yeah.
years. Like, if they still are going to offer that prize money, I still could see Patrick going out there and trying to crush it and, combining the Headlands and Mammoth. But yeah, both races are in California, which is crazy. And then the final is TBD, but that is October 17th to 20th. I'm guessing it'll be somewhere in Europe. But yeah,
Oh, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. But I with Golden Trail now we're just kind of waiting for what are the rules for 2024? Like with the addition of
yeah.
all these races, are we going to have to run 5 races? Are we still only going to have to run 3? What qualifies you for the Golden Trail World Series final?
Yeah, they kind of have like the basic points breakdown, but what they don't have listed, which I was like digging deep into, is whether or not there's a requirement. Because it's kind of been this weird gray line where, this last year was like a requirement of 2 races, maybe, but then you could go on your own. You can max out with 3 races. We've heard that this 2024 edition, you can max out with 4 races, but does that mean what is the minimum? Can you show up with 1 out of 8 races? I don't know. But yeah, I'm excited to see those come out. And then also, as of today, there hasn't been an elite form released yet. So if you are interested in participating in this race series for that reason, to collect points, etc., keep your eyes out for that, because that's how you'll determine if you get a bib, or you should know if you get support by now because you were in the top 20 this year in 2023. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that and don't miss it, because I've had people miss it before, or know people who missed it, and it's really hard to get in after that.
Yeah, definitely. I know I'm looking at the rules right now and it just says after the 8 races, out of all the athletes that rank in the top 30 on points at the end, those people will receive financial support from Golden Trail. But that's like the same as it's always been. But there's a couple other points here too, but none of them say how many races you have to run.
I see. I feel like that's kind of on purpose, though,
Yeah.
potentially, in case there's some mega breakout star that, comes and smashes everyone at Sears and now I can't do anything else. I don't know.
Yeah. I
We'll
mean,
see.
yeah, we saw that happen even with like Ally Mac, 2 seasons ago. Like
Yeah.
technically you were supposed to have 3 races, I think, and she had only run one. Did she
Yeah.
run Flagstaff?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so she had run 2, which would qualify her. But yeah, I don't think that she had planned on going prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
wild.
we'll see.
We will see, but we're very excited about that. Personally, looking at potentially Japan, Zagama, Sears now, and the 2 California races, some combo of those. Do you want
Yeah.
to share?
I am definitely doing Zagama. After that, it'll just depend on how I feel after OCC. I'd like to do both of the American races, especially because they are
Yeah.
drivable from my house.
Yeah.
But it also depends on how many races I have to run. Because right now, going to more European races doesn't make sense in my schedule. But if that's something I have to do, then I'll just have to rearrange it a little bit, maybe add Sears and all on the front end of OCC or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I feel the same about Marin. I'm like, it's so close,
yeah,
but I don't want to. I don't know. I've done the OCC come
yep.
back and race too quick, and it's just not fun.
Yeah. I'm
It
like
hurts.
the beginning of my year is like I've tried to keep that pretty, solid. And then the end of the year is like so liquid right now, other than OCC.
Yeah.
Like
Which
I
it
just
should
have
be.
no
It should
idea.
be. I mean,
Yeah.
August is already so far away, right?
So far away.
But why did we have to do that? Because registration opened
Today, actually
today.
yesterday by the time that this
Yeah.
episode comes out, but yeah, registration opened, which hopefully you are ready to pay for UTMB today. But actually you have until January 19th or something like that. Check your email. Don't quote me on that. But is kind of nice that it's not just like this week, because I don't know about you, but like Christmas is so expensive and like kind of stressful. And the idea of like dropping race entry for both Tommy and I, because we both qualified like this week, I'm like, I can't do that right now, but maybe in 3 weeks.
Yeah, maybe that's a good gift idea. If you have runner family friends, just give to their race registration stockpile so they can enter as many races as they want.
Yeah, because unfortunately we have to enter races like a year in advance for some reason.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. But yeah, that is open now. So go check out, I think it's like my UTMB profile if you want to sign up. We're still waiting on calendars from World Mountain Running Association. So that was the Valseer Running Cup this year, as well as the US Championships, like we said, from ATRA. So as soon as we know those, we'll announce those as well, because we think those are also great series to be investing your time in and checking out. And last but not least, Sky Running, they've had their calendar. They were the first ones out this year. They're like, mic drop, already got this figured out.
Yeah.
Theirs is on their website. They have a lot more races this year. Like they start in March.
Yeah.
So they have a very long season this year. And yeah, I just felt like they were adding nonstop, kind of like UTMB. So yeah, check those races out as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild year for multidisciplinary athletes, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely.
But
Um,
yeah, Danny, I know that's something that we've talked about a little bit, but obviously we'll have to wait a couple of months for announcements and stuff, is like sponsorship changes and team changes.
I
I
know.
know, yeah, you go.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, the only one I've seen so far is Madalena. So Madalena is Romanian, and she won the finals.
Yeah.
She won them. She won them. In great races in the prologue and the final. And yeah, I was kind of curious to see where she was gonna go. And I don't know, not surprising. She ended up going with Solomon International. So yeah, congrats to her. That's huge, getting your sponsorship and stuff figured out. And yeah, I'm just curious to see if other people switch. I think there's this not misconception.
Misconception. I think misconception is the right word.
Okay. We'll go with misconception that when athletes leave sponsors that it's always because they got dropped. But that's not the case. So just a little bit of insight. I'll provide as much as I can. Like you have a time frame on your contract, and once that time frame comes to an end, there's usually like a period where potentially you can go and reach out to other sponsors. Sponsors can reach out to you, and then based on the language in the contract, you can decide if you want to switch. And so sometimes athletes, for one reason or another, myself went through this process last year. I decided it was time for a change. And so, yeah, there was mutual interest from Terex. And so that's why I switched there. So, yeah, I'm just curious. Without giving away too much, there's just like some mega names that are in the in quote pipeline. I wish you could just
Yeah.
be like this person's contract over, this person's contract over, and everyone knew, and it was kind of fun. I'm with Finn Melanson on this. He talks about this all the time, like there being more transparency about team switches, like there are major sports. But in the background, some people's contracts are over, and so I'm just excited to see like, are they gonna stay? Are they gonna switch? And like, if it's a really big name, that could be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even as an athlete, I wish there was more contract transparency and team transparency, because it would make like
Totally.
negotiations and stuff much smoother, less confusing. Spoiler alert, because I know you guys are all worrying and wondering, but I re-signed my contract with Kraft. So I am not switching teams. I'm still Kraft Sportswear for another little bit here.
Yes, that's actually, I did all of that talking because I was trying to get that out of
To
you.
hype me up.
The biggest name in the sport
Biggest
right now.
name, biggest name on the market right now, and I did stay with Kraft Sportswear.
No, I love that. Kraft is doing great things. I'm super
Yes.
happy. Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
that's awesome.
But should we dive into today's episode a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. So we'll start with my thing. My
Yeah,
thing. Okay.
sure.
Okay, well, this is a big deal. All right, put my tie on. So this is kind of crazy, but I'm launching like a fun little side business, I guess, or project. I'm calling it the Runner's Binder or Danny Moreno's Runner's Binder. And it combines my passion for both project program management, which I have over 7 years experience in, mostly in tech, but through various different industries, with my time as a professional athlete. So I love being organized. I love being efficient with my time. And with that, I have a strong passion for spreadsheets, as I know a lot of other people do. And so, yeah, I've decided to templatize a couple of the spreadsheets that I've made over the years. I still have a handful more, but I want to see kind of like if people like them before I go full send. So I'm launching what I'm calling the race calendar blueprint slash template and a very basic travel planner. So I have a shop on Etsy. It's called the Runner's Binder. Go check it out. I purposely am making them very low when it comes to cost because I just want everyone to be able to utilize them. I'll have a couple different colors that you can pick, but obviously you could customize it on your own. And it's going to be a Google Sheet. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. So the Runner's Binder on Etsy. I'll also have a link in my link tree and
And
then
we'll
on my
put it in the
website.
show notes as well.
And we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's
for
that
sure.
as a
And
lead in.
that's the lead into our other entrepreneur that we have joining us today for our episode that seems fitting for the end of this year, going into next year. How to plan your race calendar, because we are still figuring it out, but we are trying to give you some good tips. And joining us today was Grayson Murphy, who, as you guys know, is the world champion, but also the founder of Race and Grayson Training Logs and Planner. We cover topics like timing between races, training blocks, more stuff like that. You'll get to hear about it for the next 45 minutes or whatever. But hopefully you guys enjoy it, and we can help you guys a little bit and maybe even help ourselves because we got to talk kind of shop between the three of us.
Yeah. And we also are going to take some Q&A after this episode. So listen to it, send us any other follow-up questions you have, and we'll answer that, either in another intro or if there's a lot of questions, then we'll do a standalone episode of how to plan your race calendar. And yeah, again, with Grayson Murphy, she's multi-sport. So we thought she was the perfect person to talk about this. And go and check out her training logs and planner. They're on sale. They're on sale through her website. And then she also has an Instagram account called RG Training Logs, which you can see linked to her account. She does a lot of collab posts between herself and her business account. So yeah, huge kudos for her for doing that for many years and bringing that experience. So yeah, enjoy.
And we will link all of that stuff in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah.
Right.
Grayson
Here's Grayson Murphy. Welcome, Grayson, to the SubHub Pod again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a couple months.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back.
And you just got done with a huge travel, end of your season, I'm assuming, in Patagonia. Tell us a little bit about your trip, how you decided to go down there, and what it was like.
Oh, yeah, it was so fun. It's like beginning and end of season, I guess, because I was really off for the last 4 months. But Saucony sponsors El Cruce, which is the race I did. It's 100K 3-day stage race. So you do about 20 miles a day. And they just asked me to go down to check it out. It's their second year sponsoring the race, and they're really trying to make a bigger impact on the trail running scene in South America. And then me and Danny had gone to Argentina before in the same place. So when they told me where it was, I was like, I can't pass this up. I have to go to Patagonia again. It's the coolest place I've ever been. And it was quite the adventure. So definitely would recommend if you are looking for a adventurous experience.
Yeah, was that your biggest set of 3 days of running ever?
Yes, I've never done that before.
Would you do it again?
Yes, I think it was really fun because I was there. We weren't really racing. It was more of like a fun time with friends. So the intensity was very low. So sleeping in tents was not very comfortable, but then you're kind of like brush it off because you're just out there with your friends. And the food situation was a little bit difficult. So I think, yes, I would go again if it was like for a fun thing. I don't know if I would go if I was meant to be like a super competitive stage race type situation, or I'd have to change some things because there's only a lot of variables to be dealing with that were not conducive to like elite performance.
Yeah. Is tent camping like required, or could you have gotten a place to stay?
I think it's required.
Okay.
And some of the places we were in were like pretty remote, and I guess if you had like nobody had crew, so maybe if you could get someone to pick you up, but basically you just arrived and then your bag was there. Yeah, I think we just got unlucky with some bad weather too, because the other waves that are finishing like today, beautiful weather, but we were sleeping in like 20-degree nights and with rain and wind, and it was like and snow, so it was like not the most comfortable thing I've ever done.
I
That's
love
cool
that.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I was
think
just
that
gonna say, sorry, we cut that out. No, I was gonna say, like, yeah, watching your Instagram stories and stuff, it looked like a couple of brutal days with like the wind whipping. And I love that one where everyone's face just looks like they're having I'm sure you guys are having a great time, but it just was like, wow, they're in it right now. Like, yeah.
Yeah, there was a ridge portion, and they ended up diverting more than half the field because once we got through it, they determined it was too dangerous to have people up there with the wind and the snow and the rain. So half the people didn't even get to run up there, but people were crying. It was a little nerve-wracking. It was mostly just really cold, and if you didn't have the layers like ready to put on, people were like getting hypothermic. So it was interesting.
yeah, you can barely convince me to sleep on the ground like for a not race because I've had a camper for so long now, let alone if I'm like trying to run a race. So I can understand that.
Yeah, it was fun though. Like, if you went with a bunch of friends, it'd be a super fun time.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys stayed safe because, yeah, going hypothermic is not fun at all. That can be really scary.
Yeah.
So good call on the race to at least cut the latter half of the people. And yeah, that's so cool. You got to go back to where you got your first world championship. So I'm sure that was really nice, to kind of end the year in such a magical place like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's so cool.
My final question relating to the race is, did that make you want to run and race further?
You know, I don't know if it did. But I think the stage racing is definitely different than if it was like, I think 50K. I would do 50K. Uh, I don't know if I'd want to do like stage races because it's really weird to be you finish, but then you're really not done. Like you're gonna do it again the next day. And I like finishing the race and then like relaxing after.
Yeah, a 50K is far enough.
I think that's plenty. Yeah.
Well, so we brought you on to actually chat about planning a race season, especially, well, all three of us have had to do this multiple times, but you also have a little bit of expertise with your Grayson training journals. And so a little bit of a plug, but also hopefully we can help people out with just how to set up a season because I feel like it's very complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the audience too, in the same boots as ourselves, you're getting excited potentially about the next year if you've already taken a break or you're about to enter your break going into 2024, and all the series are starting to release their calendars. And so all of the beautiful places you potentially could go, depending on your circumstances, or maybe even some local races at home. It's like, how do I pick from all of these options, what I'm going to do and focus on this year? So we're going to cover a couple of different areas, really stringing out our planning process, and then we'll walk you through each of our examples of how we build a calendar, and then maybe touch on some overall themes at the end. But the first thing is, what do you two consider when you're planning a race calendar? So what components of the race do you take into consideration? Grayson, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I think like the type of race, so whether it's road or trail or track, even the distance, the terrain, I guess, if it's trail too, if it's more runnable or not, and then location and time of year would be like all that go into considering a race. Actually, also prize money and like competition at the race, to be very honest.
I was muted, sorry. Mine is probably the biggest one is amount of travel necessary, especially after the last 2 years. I feel like I did a little bit too much traveling and I'm trying to like pull back on that. The depth of the race. Sometimes it's nice to like go into a race knowing that I'm going to win or probably could win. And other times I like to get my butt kicked around a little bit. And prize money and what's on my bonus structure as like a professional athlete is a big part of that as well.
I guess we should emphasize that caveat is that, as we go through this episode, is like we're all professional athletes. So do take that consideration when we are listing what we prioritize as components. Very similar to Grayson and MK. I would say my first one, though, is like my excitement to race, because I found even if it's like the most competitive race of the year, if I'm not excited to do it, it's hard for me to get riled up just based on who is there. Location and time of year is a big one, because I'm also training in like the winter, and trying to tie it in with my seasons when I think I'll be at optimal mountain shape or road shape, etc. Depth of competition for sure. The distance of the race, which has become more important to me, I would say, in the last couple of years, because I'm not just focused on, I would say, like 30K and below. Now I'm starting to consider 40K, 50K, and that's a lot more time on feet. And then, yeah, also prize money, just like being honest too, because this is my job, and I'm sure Grayson and MK, it's also their job. So you gotta make money to survive.
Yeah, and I think all three of us live in very mountainous areas that can get pretty snowed in depending on the winter. And so kind of like Danny said, time of year, a lot of times for me, I forget that that can happen. And I'll be like, I'll sign up for this race in like March. And then all of a sudden there's snow everywhere. And I'm like, why did I decide to run a trail race? If it's like in Auburn, that's totally fine. But if you're trying to run like something super mountainous over in Europe and you can't train until May really on the trails, like don't sign up for a springtime steep race.
No.
Yeah, and maybe Grayson with you too, with that you're balancing like being on the roads and the trails too. You maybe consider season 2.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to my coach this morning, and yeah, we were thinking like usually, and this has been typical of my last couple of years, there's like a road or track season to start the year, because it's so much easier to just train for that if it's snowy, and then you can move into like more trail stuff once the trails at home open up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now we have our components. We more or less have very similar priorities. Where do you guys start to organize kind of like these drawers that you're going to list the races in? Or what tools do you use?
I am a big Google Sheets or just Google Drive everything. So everything that I own and do is in Google Drive. So I usually make a Google Sheet at the beginning of the year with that list of priorities and then the races, and try to organize it from there.
Yeah, I love spreadsheets. So I also start there and just kind of like word vomit all the races, even if there's way too many that you would ever possibly be able to do, but just get them all on paper so you can see them and dates and timing and travel.
And that makes 3 of us. Yeah, I think the brain dump method is just so nice, because I'm sure with you guys too, you're like taking in all these races, even like old ones, new ones. And even there's also a question of like, is this race still going to be relevant this year? Potentially. There was good prize money that last year, but does that necessarily come over, etc. So just listing all of those and then putting the drawers kind of at the top, or categories. So like location, distance, blah, 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 blah. I find to be really helpful. And then I also will put like expected race finish time, very general, like this is about a 4-hour race or 3-hour race. So I can really start to see like, I can't do all of these. And then another aspect that I'll do during the brain dump is like, I'll get a full calendar printout and take out a pencil and I'll circle the dates of every single race so I can see them all together and then start to kind of like piece together there. Cool.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm remembering that I got my spreadsheet for race calendar from you because I have like the same thing where it's like expected duration, elevation gain, expected recovery time, like goals, things to consider. I'm pretty sure you gave that to me. What was that?
Is it color coded?
Mine is based on like the category of race, like is it an A race, a B race, a training race?
Okay. I've color coded too before. Usually mine is like pink is for trail, blue is for road, green is for track. And then you can see like if you're mixing seasons, like all the different terrain type too.
I love that. Yeah. I'm also a color coded person. Are we all like A-type personnel?
So weird that 3 women who are distance minded would be type A personalities.
Yeah. Weird.
Weird. So weird. Yes, I also color code and I color code based off of series also. So like that what's called column will have different colors based off of that. And then I'll color code based off what I think my A races are going to be and stuff like that. Yeah, I think since we're already going into it, like Grayson, you want to go through an example and maybe talk about like at which points during this process, kind of just like lay it all on us, individuals you reach out to, and at what points you kind of transfer it potentially to other tools if you do.
Yeah, I guess I start with my coach, David Roach, and we'll usually like this morning was our day one basically, and we just kind of spitball like ideas that we've had throughout the year and based on this year, like what will next year look like, and just races that come to mind. And then we kind of like our next step now will be putting that down on a Google sheet. And then I'll also call my agent because especially with a lot of the road stuff, that's kind of where he comes in more, and having his input's nice. He's also a runner, so I value his opinion, and he ran professionally for many years, so he has some good advice there. And then I usually talk to my fiance Logan too. More for moral support than anything. But it's nice to just kind of like tell someone. And then I probably talk to Danny almost every year asking you what to do. Yeah, so that's people. And then once it's on a spreadsheet with the brain dump, then I'll start like thinking more intrinsically, like, well, what are my goals for next year? And like what excites me and what would make me happy? And then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's great for people who have coaches. Like the coach should want to be involved, in my opinion, in making your calendar because they're providing a better bird's eye view, at least for me, maybe the same for you guys, because they more times than not have been training you potentially for more than one season, unless you're working with a new coach. They kind of like can see patterns. Anyone watching on YouTube, Bodhi is doing big jumps off the bed.
He's going wild back there.
Some puppy content. So I think that's awesome that you include him. And then you said your fiance as well. And so I'm curious, like, at what point during this planning period do you go to him, or is it just throughout the whole thing you're talking out loud and stuff?
Yeah, I guess maybe more towards like when I'm starting to narrow it down and have harder questions to answer because he's not a runner. So like the nitty-gritty details of like, should I do this series or this one? He would be like, I have no idea what those even are. But if it gets down between like 2 races and I'm like, should I go to New Zealand or like Austria? What do you think? Then I'll kind of hear his opinion there. Yeah. What about you guys?
I also just wanted to ask you, like, what makes a race an A race for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it depends. If it's in a series, then the final of that series would be the A race. But I think like with Golden Trail, for example, there's a couple that maybe I feel like my talents are like well suited for. So then that would become maybe like a secondary A race within the whole series. So maybe yeah, it's kind of like what races do I think I am specifically suited for versus others that might be a little more challenging.
That makes sense. I feel like every year when I go to like color code my A race, B race, training race, I like look at my sheet and I'm like, that's a lot of A races. Like, what happened here? So I think something that like, at least for me, like my coach has helped me with is actually deciding what an A race is and how far apart those A races should be. Like, how many A races can I have in a 4-month period or whatever? Because that's like, I think one of the biggest problems with trails is that the season can be all year round, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. And so for me, yeah, I have to like step back and be like, okay, they're not all A races. They can't be, or you won't make it to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good, yeah, I would definitely say that has been a top mistake I've made as well, because like if you are doing something, I don't know, Broken Arrow, Speed Goat, and Sierra now, I think that's a great buildup for someone who maybe is like based in North America and wants to try and peak at Sierra now. Broken Arrow is still very competitive, and like you can easily make that an A race. And you could still have Sierra now be an A race. And that to me isn't crazy if you wanted to be really good at Broken Arrow and Sierra now. But if you threw like Speed Goat 50K in there, right? Because the distance is so much longer, then I think it would be harder to make Sierras now still an A race in that. So I think it's like trying to learn like what distances work well for you, and how well you recover, how much you eat during the race, and like your ability to bounce back afterwards, which has also been a learning curve. Because at least for us, like going over to Europe, I think that compounds my recovery at times when I'm coming back home and having to deal with that travel versus just like racing in the US. I find that I can crank out more races during a whole summer season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the travel is rough.
I know. That's why this year I'm trying to change my priorities. It's not working out great. I'm still traveling just as many times, I think, but like I'm just trying to I'm trying to space it out more, maybe.
I'm
Yeah.
always like, do you just go and spend 6 weeks in Europe and just bang them out? Or do you go 3 times to Europe, but they're like shorter trips, but I don't know which one has less like overall load added.
Yeah. For me, it's just like realistically, I miss my dogs and my husband too much. So like and Tommy's constantly trying to convince me like we should go over to Europe for like a month and a half. And I'm like, but what about the dogs? I can't do it. I just like I'd rather go back and forth a couple of times, which is why I have to space it out because I know that I can't just like be over there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. MK, before we jump into yours, Grayson, I had one more question. I'm going to have more questions, but at least for right now. Last year you actually like published a calendar, which I don't think you had done before, potentially, or maybe in smaller increments. And so I'm curious, like, if you gave yourself like a deadline of when you wanted to, obviously, you know, it was a different year, but like, yeah, of when you're like, I want to decide on races by then.
Um, I think it was like not a self-imposed deadline, more a like series or race imposed deadline. I just had to have decided and let these race directors know by that date if I was coming or not. Yeah, I would do it again. Hopefully I don't get sick again so that I can actually like complete the calendar that I intended to do.
Yeah. I feel like 2-3 weeks before every race this year, I was like, all right, I'm on my way to like such and such race, only like 2 weeks left or whatever. And now I'm like, I have a race on the calendar that I probably won't announce unless somebody asks me about it until like 2 weeks before, because the last two races I have had to drop out of. And so I'm just like, I'm just gonna wait.
Yeah,
Really?
it's hard because people want to know like where you're racing. I find that I also want to know where people are racing so I can like see if I can, it's like, oh, that field sounds great. Like I want to try and show up there too. Um, So yeah, I think it's like finding that balance and what works for you. And regardless, like not being scared to put it out into the universe, even if it might change. Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna happen eventually because I like for people to know, and my family likes to know too. That's how like a lot of them keep up with me, is on like, Instagram and Facebook. So eventually I'll get past it. But as of right now, I'm like, ugh, I've announced like 2 races that I've had to drop out of. So
You do you. You
we're
do
just
you.
chilling right now.
Yeah. I think
As
that's
someone who has dropped out of like the last 9 races I was supposed to do, I can tell you it gets easier. Like
Yeah.
the more you
You're like, don't worry about me. I'll come back eventually. I
Yeah.
promise.
not dead yet. So
No, I love that. So I guess the way that I do my planning is a lot of it in the beginning is just me talking to my husband like incessantly. Once a day, I'll be like, oh, but what about this idea? What about these races? And he's like, can we talk about like literally anything else but running? We do this every day. So there'll be like 2 weeks of that where I just like keep coming up with ideas and ways to put it together. And then I'll finally come up with like a reasonable schedule, reasonable enough. And I'll put it in my little sheet with distance, travel, what else is going on. Like if I have a family trip planned, sometimes I forget to put those in there. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this is way too busy. But so I'll put all that information in there. And then Rick and I will have like a 2-hour conversation, like trying to come up with what the best system actually could be, because I have learned that for me, recovery is the biggest thing. I thought I could race a lot, even if it was short distance stuff, and I can't do that. I need like a decent amount of time between races. And so, yeah, Rick and I will sit down for quite a while and like figure out a race schedule. And usually it ends up changing because I will finish a race and be like, actually, I don't want to do this next race at all. Like, I'm not excited about it, like Danny was saying. And so, it's always funny to have like a full year planned, because I feel like half the time it ends up changing like by March anyways. But and that's really the extent of my planning, I guess. It's just like annoying Tommy and then finally sitting down and like letting Rick help me with it.
what common perspective, sorry, can't talk today, does Rick normally bring to the table for you? Where maybe you can sit, like maybe you could talk for Rick at this point, but it's nice to have him in the room.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times he will like put races into perspective for me. Like I'll think like, oh, this is a really important race that needs to be on my schedule because like other people say it's important. And Rick will be like, yeah, but do you want to run that race? Like, yes, you could make some money or like, get some amount of like people to watch you and follow you from this, but like, is it something that you actually care about? Because he knows very well that if I don't care about it, the training is going to be like a slog, and that's just not fun. So yeah, I think that, but also at the same time, he will ask me, like, we have a column, for prize money purposes. And he's like, what races do you feel like you need to do for like the purpose of winning prize money? Can we fit a couple more in that aren't that high stress, just to like help me make the most out of my job, but also not get overwhelmed by it, I guess.
I like the key piece of being like flexible, of being okay like pivoting if you're not excited about it anymore. Because sometimes in January you feel so stoked about something, and then by June you're like, I could care less if I did
Yeah.
this race or not.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I totally agree. Especially because I'm the type of person that like always makes my season like most of the year. And then by September, I'm like, what was I thinking signing up for this race in November when I've been racing since January?
And so those races that, maybe you're doing more for you enjoy them regardless, but to, hit your, we'll say like base stipend or base salary. Do you normally incorporate those as B races? And to you, like what makes a good B race leading into an A race?
Yeah, typically there'll be B races. although some of them are early enough in the season, like, you know, some of the March 50Ks, for example, are early enough that I'm not like too concerned about them. But like Mammoth Trail Fest, for example, was kind of pretty close to OCC. I wasn't sure if I was going to run it, but it's one of those races that like I wanted to run, but also I could make money off of. And so I think the important parts about a B race are that you have to be willing to train through them most of the time and feel comfortable, like knowing that you're maybe not showing up to the starting line 100%. And there has to be enough recovery time, like from between the B race into your A race. So if you know that you're somebody that can't train through a race, don't even set up B races, in my opinion, because some people can't do that. And it is really hard to like show up and be like, I maybe am not going to win today, but I'm going to like try to, but I'm also running like full mileage right now. So I think that's a very important piece, is to maybe be able to put aside your ego a little bit, but also still kind of try to make some money if you can.
Yeah, like really understand the purpose of it.
Yeah.
And again, this is coming from 3 professional runners, where, you know, we're taking into consideration prize money a lot of times, the A race, right? Usually some of the most competitive races in the world. But also these B races are fitness checkpoints, I think, a lot of times for us. And so what I think MK is saying, like, being able to really treat it as a B race is like not going to the well potentially, if you can handle that. So sometimes, you know, you go to a race and you're like, but I just really want to race this and like let it all out. And that's not necessarily the purpose of it. So I think for everyone that's listening, it's like, know the purpose of your B race. My assumption, right or wrong, is that I think a lot of people use B races to see that they can actually go the distance of potentially their A race, and that it's not going to cause over fatigue, potential injury, overuse, etc. So if you're doing your first 50K, you know, maybe recommend throwing like 1 or 2 25Ks, or maybe like a 10K and a 25K, just to get like more time on feet and seeing how the body's responding before you jump back up. Whereas
Also,
like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say also really good supported long runs, especially if you're somebody that's running
Yeah.
like 100K, like running a couple 50Ks is really great. You don't have to carry as much food. You don't have to do loops to go back to your car to get food.
Yeah. And especially that's when I like to do smaller races also, is like for B races and stuff, support local community, local directors, etc. Those are really fun. I had one more question, but Grayson, do you have any questions for MK?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, well, back to B race. I was just gonna say, like MK said, if you know yourself, and I like know I'm either like 0 or 100 with races. So I like just really not good at doing like B races. So I don't do many of them because I know I can't have like no chill. And then, but I was gonna ask, how do you plan like off seasons? Because you can make a trail running or running calendar year round. So do you put that in ahead of time? Do you just kind of like look for times throughout the year that you want to take a break in the middle of things, or how do you like put in off time?
I think I want to be the kind of person who takes like 2 to 3 weeks off, like all in one go at the end of a season. But every year it turns out that I take like 10 days off between big races instead. And I think that's still okay. But I was also like, we're going to talk about mistakes at some point, and I feel like that's one of the mistakes that I tend to make. And maybe one day I'll learn, is that maybe I need a little bit more time at the end of a season instead of just like little breaks all year. What about you, Danny?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I've quite figured out 100%, but I do feel that I've learned a lot of hard lessons. And mostly I plan them at the beginning of the year if I can, after A races. Now, stuff can happen all the time, and that's where it gets tough. Like if you get sick, you know, like a lot of people got COVID this year, unplanned injuries or life happenings, you know, maybe something unfortunate happens in your family life, etc. And that can like add breaks in. But I want to like scream this from the top of roofs, like that's still not a break though. Because
stress.
that's stress still. So just because, you know, something that wasn't planned happened and you're like, well, that made me take 3 days off. It's like, no, you probably were emotionally really charged. You still were probably coming off of a big effort or in the middle of your training block. Even during tapering, like tapering takes energy too, even though like you're supposed to be recharging at that time, depending on what point of the taper you're in, because you could be getting hyped for a big race. The body's recovering from big load, etc. So yeah, I think it's good regardless if like something happens that wasn't planned to still try and stick to your planned breaks. I think that's also where cross training can come in really handy. Like if you really have trouble taking days off, you can do some light biking and just change the stimulus up, but I would recommend like planning them in for sure. So even after OCC this year with everything that happened, like I still took my days off that I was planning to take off. And, you know, I pat myself on the back because like I think that's why Mammoth Trail Fest and Kodiak still went well. It's like I still gave myself those days off, even though the race didn't go out because the training block was still really heavy going into that.
Yeah. What
One of
about
the-
you, Grayson?
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the things me and David started doing this year that I felt like was really helpful was planning for the whole week after a race, the whole following week would be like a down week. So not like fully off, but take a day or two off if I felt like I wanted to, and then like go mountain biking for like more days than I ran. And even I had like some mountain bike races those weeks following. But it was just a great way to like force me to not be super running heavy and like take a mental break from the running stimulus, which I've learned I get burnt out emotionally or mentally before I get burnt out physically. So I have to like take care of that piece first.
Yeah, there's a reason that I have a coach, and one of the main reasons is that without a coach, I would probably never take time off, or at least not enough time. Like as a coach, I give my athletes off time like crazy. I'm like, yeah, you're fine. Like your fitness is there, you're doing great. And then I look at myself and I'm like, oh no, I can't take that week off. No way. And so Rick is like definitely there to most of the time after races, like even this last year I did Canyons 50K, and then only 5 weeks later was the World Championships. And so in my head I was like, okay, we're just gonna like train through it, we're gonna like the week after that's still gonna be pretty big. But Rick was like, no, you just ran a 50K, like you're not gonna run until Thursday or Friday, and even then I probably won't even get you back up to your like real mileage until like the Tuesday or Wednesday after that. And I was like, what? And it worked. It was fine. But in my head, it was like, I have to take time off in this 5 week block that I have. Mind you, I'd been training, you know, since October, but that didn't matter.
Yeah, the coaches, oh, they're great. I love coaches. I love my coach. I'm sure you guys love your coaches too. I just think it's something I recommend to everyone if they want to up their commitment to the sport at all, for sure. Grayson, I wish you could see my notes because I had written kind of down like I'm very emotional, which we kind of know that about each other. And so I guess for my process is like when I'm looking at the year, I think it's become less and less. Like I would say I used to go for like 5 or 6 A races. Now I'm down to like 2 A races, maybe a third, depending how things are firing. And the reason for that is I find like even if I have a good race, like that's still exhausting to me afterwards because all the emotions that come with that, even on the high end, like deserve their rest. And because I'm so driven by emotion too, which I've come to terms with and now I love about myself, I didn't for a while. Like the build also can be emotional for me because I start to get emotionally attached to races, which comes with big pros, but also, you know, it's balanced out with the other heavy side. So yeah, I also do the brain dump, put all the races on there, do a big calendar, circle all the dates. And then I start to ask myself, like, which races do I really want to do? Am I excited about? So then I'll highlight all those. I'll be like, okay, that's 10. We need to narrow this down. What is the goal? What is the goal of this year? What am I like fired up? Can I think about for many weeks and like it doesn't dull? and I can go to practice thinking about. And so I'll try and narrow that down, and that usually gets it to like 5. And then that's when I'll bring in Terry, who's my coach. And I'll give him like 3 to 5 options of the calendar could look like this, 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 and this. And usually whatever my gut is saying every single time, I'm like, and you probably don't agree with this. He's like, yeah, I don't agree with that. So it's a lot of that, which I feel like he's already going to know, which has taken years to get to, I will say, from working with him for nearly 6 years now. And so I thank him for that, because I think that also has been a large part of, knock on wood, me staying healthy for many years, having like a pretty consistent career in the last few years, being able to come to the table when I want. And yeah, and then we start to go into more of those location traveling, like MK said. 2021, I traveled a lot, and I was really tired coming into this year, and I felt that. And then prize money. And then this is probably where I start to reach out to, like, where are you going? Like, who can I house with? Who can I have a trail party with? Like, who's gonna like elevate me, and maybe hopefully I can elevate them, but we're all just like excited to be at the same race, etc. Because yeah, being there with friends who also like lift me up in my performance, I think is just like so cool. And people that also, like, if I have a bad day, will be there for me, I think is also kind of a cool thing. And then the last person is Mike, because he calls me on my BS all the time, where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And usually maybe I'll talk to him before Terry and again after Terry, and it looks, very different from when I talk to Terry. But yeah, Mike will be like, didn't that make you really tired in like 2018? I'm like, yeah, but like maybe this time I won't be tired. He's like, no, it's definitely not the case.
He's like, Danny, you're older now.
Yeah, he's like, we need
Not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I should be getting more energy. He's like, no, you run farther now.
Yeah.
He's like,
Oh
your
my
everything
gosh.
is more. Why would you think you'd have more energy? So Mike is really nice. He's like, yeah, he's the truth bomb that I love so much. And then adding flexibility in there, which MK and Grayson both talked about. I also put my calendar out, on social media and stuff. And I think that's a fun thing. I honestly used to be really nervous about that, because it felt so vulnerable to be like, these are the races I'm going to be at. And not showing up and like feeling judged, like Danny doesn't show up to races, or she's ditching the competition and stuff. But like the people that actually know me know what's going on. And I've learned that's kind of just what matters. And it's fun to put your calendar out there, because people that are interested in your careers, I think, get a kick out of that, which I appreciate those people too. And yeah, I think I touched on everything. Oh, when I try to have my calendar usually by the beginning of the year, because it helps me focus. I think I'm kind of like a puppy dog if I don't have that structure. I wish I was one of those people, but I'm not. Like, I like to see kind of potentially what my calendar is going to look like, because it helps me, focus on my training blocks ahead.
Yeah, I need to have it written down, because even in the last 2 weeks with Rick and I talking about the schedule, the first time I talked to him, I wasn't looking at what I had written down, and I totally forgot about one race that I really wanted to do. And then like a week later, I was like, oh wait, but this one too. I'm sorry, I forgot. Because yeah, that's like the year is long. Like, there's so many races, so many options, and I'm like, oh yeah, this, and this. And then I was like, oh, actually there's another one too. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of writing things down, which is why I use the training log to have and make and sell. But there's something about writing it down too that's a lot more like intimate of a process when you're deciding on like goals and stuff than even the Google sheet. And I still use both, but I think like they're different tools to use.
I think they are too, because I like circling on the calendar. Like, that's a definitely different process from seeing it in line by line. How do you use your planner when you're planning out the year? Just out of curiosity.
First, so I'll get one to show you. Okay, first there's like a goals page for the year, like overall year. So like the beginning, that's where like New Year's resolutions or goals or whatever you want to call them get put, and it's just like a blank page. So I'll like do that like every January 1st, pretty much. And it includes life stuff too, like financial goals and business goals and life goals and other goals that I want to hit. And then from there, and I'll put race goals on it. Then I like fill out the race schedule page, which is like by month. And I'll color code that too, like I do on the spreadsheet of like by series and a race and kind of like what I want to do with it. So it's a process, but the race one doesn't get filled out probably till a couple months later, like February or March fully, because usually I'm still seeing what races I can get into and like solidifying everything.
Why do you think it's powerful to write it down?
I think it's a lot more like focus driven, like because you have to take a pen to the paper and write it out, and it forces you to like actually think about what you're doing and what you're writing. And then for me, it kind of feels like it helps hold me more accountable throughout the year because I wrote it down. I didn't even type it out. Like it's in my handwriting and I can see it. And I'll like decorate the page too as part of that process. Usually there's some doodles on there. But yeah, I think it's just like more intimate and a nicer way to be more introspective than a Google sheet, and still love Google Sheets. Can't say enough good things about spreadsheets, but also it's just a different tool, I think, of like getting maybe the more emotional piece and connecting with that side of the race schedule as opposed to the logistics side, which a spreadsheet's good for.
Yeah, I feel like you're way less likely to have like a journal entry on your Google sheet. Like,
Right.
you know, you're like, I highlighted it, I did the race. Whereas like if you
Yeah.
have a log, you can write how it felt. Like, how did your nutrition go? Like, what can we do differently? What did we do great? You know, and so
Totally.
I like
Yeah, I
that.
always go back and like write out the time too, or like, was it a PR? What place did I get? And I have like the race day goal setting worksheets in the training log too. So then I'll go back on those and they have the review at the bottom. So you can like write out, yeah, how did it go? What did I feel? What did I think? And you can be totally honest because no one is reading it. Like, not all your Instagram followers aren't going to read it. You don't have to worry about being judged about it. Your coach might not ever even see it. So it's a good way to be honest with yourself and not feel judged for it.
I love that. Is that a new addition this year?
Yeah, this is a new one.
I love that.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so cool. I think it's really important to do a little retro on your race, regardless of how it went. You could have ran the fastest time by a bajillion minutes and stuff, but still like taking the moment to take it in via pen. I also imagine like having it in the front, you can see your goals every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're very aware of like what you're working towards, which like you said helps keep you focused if you're someone that can get unfocused easily, which I can, or kind of distracted by things.
Yeah, I get that for sure.
So I think one of the more important things that we can provide with this episode for people is maybe our biggest mistakes that we've made in planning out a year. Because, you know, we've all had a year where we've done too much or too little or whatever. So we'll start with Danny, maybe, since you've been asking a ton of the questions. Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've made in putting together a trail season?
It's funny that you say that. I didn't realize I was, because I love this stuff. So I'm just like trying to learn. I'm like, what do you guys do? I love planning. Grayson knows I'm like sending over travel sheets. I'm like, check out this travel sheet that I made. Okay. Lessons learned. I would say kind of low hanging fruit is having too many races on the calendar and feeling that I had to do them. Because I would say that was like my 2018, maybe even bleed into 2019, where I just was so tired. And I'm like, why did I think I had to do that just because it was on the schedule? Like, you can always adjust. So yeah, just because, you put it in a sheet or a calendar, like constantly reassess yourself. Like, that is literally just a skeleton, and like fill the skeleton throughout the year. Maybe that's not the right analogy. Maybe like a coloring book page. Yeah, it's a coloring book page, and it has numbers, and like you have the color set that you're going to put in the coloring book page, But throughout the year, like maybe you're not going to use pine green and now you're going to switch to mint green, and that's okay. So just being open to change, regardless, not just running life, but all of life's things that can happen. The other thing, and this is maybe something that like comes at the end of the year, is that I'll write a goal down, type a goal down, think of a goal, and I won't hit it. And I'll think that I like made my dream too big, and I get really hard on myself. Like, why did I think I could do that? But you can always carry that goal, or just this might be opposite from some people. I'll be like, I hit that goal, and now I'm gonna dream even bigger. Maybe I didn't hit 75 in the half, and that's okay. But this year, I think I actually can hit 73, even though I didn't hit 75. So don't be scared to like carry goals over, or make them even bigger. It's just like whatever feels most right to you, I would say. And then maybe MK, you'll touch upon this. If I'll just keep it to 3, too much travel. Like, I feel so blessed and gracious that I'm in a position, as I'm sure you are too, to travel the world for our job, to the most beautiful places in the world. But at the same time, aside from, environmental reasons, like emotionally, that is really tiring to, get ready, do all the travel, go and do this really big thing that is important across many life categories, and then go back home and like sit with it in a different place. I find I can't do that a lot. So just mitigating for that. Actually, I'm going to put in one more. Sorry. The last thing is not putting in too many other races, and just being kind to my body. Similar to Grayson, like if it's a big enough race, it's hard for me to like tone it down. I love competing. So just respecting that about myself, that's okay. And just like choosing races that are better accommodating. Yeah. What about you, MK?
I think my biggest mistake, I kind of already touched on this already, is not taking downtime. I just like love to run. Every winter I've told myself that I'm going to turn into like a skier in the winter, and then I'm going to run the rest of the year. And every year I sign up for a race in February or January. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I just need to be better. Like that, if I know I'm going to do that, then the month of October or whatever needs to just be chill. Because then I'm like, oh, I'll race all the way through October, and then I'll take like a week off. But that never works out that way. So either, plan breaks throughout the season that are substantial enough to actually count as breaks, not just like 2 to 3 days, or write it down that you have 3 weeks off at the end of the season. So that's definitely my number one learning experience. Also for me, it was like, I don't know if it's as much of an emotional toll for me, but physically I cannot race all the time. Like I need probably 5 to 6 weeks between a race, even if it's like a sub ultra effort. So learning what kind of recovery I needed was really big. And then, yeah, the last one for me was travel. I tend to forget that traveling for personal reasons is just as exhausting as traveling for races. And so I like don't really plan those into my race season. And then all of a sudden I'm traveling all the time, even if it's just to go to Texas to visit my family. Like that messes with your training block, it messes with your sleep, all that stuff. And so just make sure that you're planning that personal travel in along with the race travel.
I think all of those are mine as well from both of you. I have one to add though that kind of along the lines of Danny, but maybe a little more pointed, was I in the past, and still I need to keep reminding myself of it, disregard the emotional toll or like emotional hangover post race too. Even if it's a good race, like winning worlds, it's like such a high, and I literally felt like weirdly depressed after, because you're like so high and then you come down from that, and forgetting that has been tough sometimes, because I can race physically maybe a little bit more, like I could do like 3 weekends in a row, but then I forget, oh, emotionally I like actually can't do that if they're like high profile races and you're getting interviewed after for hours and you have to talk about the race for the weeks following, that's like an emotional toll too that I forget about a lot of the time. So building that into a schedule has become important as well.
I think that's so interesting that it seems like we have two people that are emotionally, it's hard to handle a ton, and physically maybe we can handle more, whereas MK potentially are the opposite. It's so weird how humans are created to be balanced in some sort of way. Yeah, no, I agree with all those too. Kind of just like thank you guys. Thanks for sharing your process. I hope that speaks to some people, at least, a little bit. Again, we'll, emphasize this caveat. We're all professional runners, so take that into consideration when you're building out your race calendar. But let's just go over some last overall takes before we wrap this up. Sorry, guys. One of the ones was avoid overcommitting. I think we all touched upon that, especially in the sport of trail running. It's like, I want to run here, I want to run there. Like, it's all so beautiful, but it will take a toll in some capacity. So just be kind to yourself, and really take it in doses. It is good to kind of savor the sport, in my opinion, over many years versus trying to do every race possible in the same year, at risk for, overuse injuries, over fatigue, just potentially getting yourself an emotional hole, etc. We didn't really talk about this, so maybe let's do it very briefly, is macro versus micro training blocks.
Yeah, I think it's important. And this kind of goes back to what you were just saying. Like, you feel like you can race a lot. I don't. Like, know your body well enough to know when you can peak and how frequently you can do so. Because I have found that I can't like peak and stay there for a whole month to try to race 3 times or whatever. And so my blocks of training have to be a little bit bigger, I think, in order for me to feel confident. And so learning your body and how it works for you, I think, is important. But yeah, you gotta remember that training takes a toll and peaking takes a toll as well. So you can't do that like super frequently.
I would agree with that. And if you're trying to mix terrain types like road and trail, then be cognizant of like, well, if I want to do a road marathon, I know that's like a 3-month, 12-week commitment of a training block that is like pretty dedicated to one race. Whereas if I'm doing trail stuff over through the whole summer, I can just look at it as like little microcycles all summer instead of like one big 3-month long block.
Yeah.
Yeah. And plugs for the coaches again. Like, I feel coaches are super helpful in knowing their athletes and the type of training blocks that they might or may respond to the best. So if you need a long one or a short one, yeah. This is a good one. Planning breaks. We've talked about that. But the other one is, don't risk your next season or year to feel like you have to do something. So the FOMO, that probably goes along with the avoid overcommitting. So yeah, power in knowing thyself. Figure yourself out. The more you know about yourself and what are your potential triggers in both good ways and bad ways will help you to decide what race schedule is best for you, along with loved ones, friends, and your coaches. And then the last category, which I think this is really important to emphasize, especially for this episode, is we're trail specific. Obviously, Grayson mixes it up, as do MK and I, on the roads here and there. But most of you probably mostly do trail races. And so if you were to build out just a road calendar, it is probably going to look drastically different from a trail calendar, depending on like the type of terrain, altitude, elevation. Like, for example, you could do a half marathon and trail and it could take you like 3 to 5 hours, depending on where you are in the pack, versus that same person on the road, a half marathon may take them 90 minutes to 3 hours, right? So considering that time on feet, so that's why I find that personal column helpful, like estimated race duration. So I could kind of see it like, oh, my B race to OCC probably shouldn't take me 8 hours. Like, think about those small tidbits. Yeah.
Like when you think it's only a half marathon, but then you put the estimated duration down, it's like, oh, right, there's 8,000 feet in that half marathon. It's going to take me a while.
And you should start charging people $1 to download your spreadsheet.
Yeah, you should. I owe
Somehow.
Danny $1.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me your money. Yeah, definitely. Grayson, I mean, you go between the two trains. You want to touch anything else upon that?
Yeah, I think I would add like the time on feet versus like wear and tear, because like I ran not basically, almost 3 marathons in a row last weekend in 3 days, and you couldn't do that on the road just because the pounding is so much more intense, and the intensity of the race overall is higher, and biomechanically it's a much higher load. So I think that plays into road stuff too if you're thinking about having like a hybrid race schedule.
Yeah, how much time? I know that you can transition to trails pretty easily, but how much time would you recommend for people to consider a transition period to and from?
Yeah, too, I think, yeah, back to kind of knowing your body.